Hello
Hey,
again. This is
Carrie.
our second podcast. So today I thought we'd start with some tough topics. They also happen to start with the letter T. Transference, countertransference, and termination. It's a lot to cover in a short time, so we'll see what we can do. I think you and I can manage though.
So should we start with what what all those terms mean? So
Yeah,
transference.
let's define it.
Yeah. So transference is usually when we're talking about something in therapy and the client maybe is projecting or triggered by something that we're doing. And so
Is that
they
when they
can
fall in love with us? I mean,
maybe.
let's be real. I'm kidding. I think so it's like deeply rooted in their history, but we might be reminding them of someone like their caretaker.
Yeah.
So we might say something and they're like, wait, I can't have you do this. Like that's
Mhm.
not, you know. How do you think they respond to transference, like unconsciously?
So it might be getting like nervous with us,
Mhm.
or is some of the like body responses. So like just what happens when your body gets anxious. So
Do you think they dissociate depending on if there's like a trauma response or a trauma history?
maybe, I mean, well, yeah, a transference, I guess, isn't usually a like you're not aware that it's happening. You're just
Right.
triggered by something that reminds you of like a past incident.
Yeah.
So maybe we say something or our mannerisms, and it could be good or bad.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
I was going to say, because my assumption was they automatically get defensive, but then that would be even more of a little bit of awareness of it. It's not completely unconscious if there's something that the therapist is doing, which is kind of making them bristle. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see if we can come up with some examples of like how this happens. But then there's countertransference, right? When the therapist's own issues kind of start getting in the way of their thoughts about or toward the client. Hence
Mm-hmm.
the reason therapists need therapy. But that's very common, right? It's something I
Mm-hmm.
think therapists have some shame around discussing. Um, but how do you think that happens? Like, is that a good simplified definition of it? Or what? I mean, what else do you
Yeah,
think
I
needs to
think
be said
so. And
there?
certainly I can give an example. Like I don't mind sharing, my as a kid whose parents are well, an adult child whose
Yeah.
parents separated when I was a kid,
Yeah.
I mostly do feel like I've dealt with that. But depending on whatever's going on at that time, there are
Mm.
conversations I have with clients who will tell stories about either conflict with their parents or like one parent in particular. And I'm like, oh, this sounds so familiar.
Yeah, and you want to be like,
And
I feel you, but it's like you have to say it objectively, like
yeah,
not like I completely understand, but like,
yeah,
oh yeah, I understand that might be hard.
yeah. Yeah, so it's really
Sounds
us
good to
getting
me.
triggered. And so going back to
Yeah.
like that question you said about what do the clients notice when they're experiencing transference,
Mhm.
for me, it is some of those anxious symptoms, like, maybe noticing differences in my breathing or my heart beating a little bit faster,
Oh
or
my
just
God,
kind of like
volume.
stumbling.
Yeah.
Yeah, stumbling on my words because I'm like, oh, I want to still be present and like connect with somebody but not overshare. And as a therapist, we're taught not to disclose a lot of personal information, and I probably
Yeah.
disclose too much.
That's what my
um
clients love about me, I think. They're like,
I hope my
my favorite word is fuck. And they're like, I can curse. I'm like, well, then I'll be on my own if you don't. So I appreciate it.
yeah.
That's interesting. So yeah, transference is when they're getting triggered. Countertransference is when the therapist is getting triggered. Hopefully, we can step back when we experience a client having transference. Addressing the elephant in the room is really important. Like it can be awkward, but I always tell people if you can understand the dynamic in our relationship, you can heal the dynamic in other
Mhm.
relationships. Like
Mhm.
that's why role modeling and practicing communication skills are such basic goals that I feel like I work on all the time with clients. But if you can address something with me in an assertive way, then it's good practice for in your other relationships. And so us role modeling as the therapist, then bringing up something that might be awkward, is probably really important then. So I think I don't know why I'm thinking, I don't know how she addressed it specifically, but didn't the book maybe you should talk to someone? Is that Lori
Mm,
Gottlieb? Maybe
yeah.
you should talk to somebody. I feel like she addressed this. Oh, she did hardcore because she was going through a breakup, and was her therapist reminding her of her boyfriend, or was she projecting? I think she
Yeah.
was projecting a lot onto him. And
I don't remember enough about, it's been so
yeah,
long since I've read that book.
I mean, it was just genius because she's talking about the most significant 5 clients, right, in her history of therapy thus far. But she was going through a serious breakup and having a difficult time kind of separating herself as a client then with her own therapist, and like having these fantasies
Mm,
about his relationship, his romantic life, and all of that. But that's all working it through. I mean, I really
yeah.
think that's, really important to acknowledge. I think, unfortunately, a lot of people might discharge and ghost the therapist if they experience that. Like if they feel triggered and it kind of freaks them out, they might be like, "Oh, this is not the therapist for me," and have no idea why. And
Yeah.
that's really
And
sad.
and that leads to probably another topic that I'd love for us to have sometime, but like
Mm.
how to have hard conversations or
Yeah,
uncomfortable conversations, and
yeah,
just like what are our
yeah.
communication patterns, like how are those formed and how do they impact us as adults?
Right.
Yeah.
It's so interesting. Yeah. So like we should get into termination, but I have a new client who said I met with a therapist a couple times and I didn't like him, and or just it wasn't a right fit. And I was like, okay, well, I suggest you have a conversation with that person. They can always make changes, but also just like give them a heads up. Like I'm choosing someone else, and that's okay too. Then I got a new referral for somebody who said, I've been meeting with my therapist for a year and it's not a good fit. I'm like, oh no. So something's been wrong for a while and they didn't feel comfortable saying anything. So it'll be interesting, to take on a new client knowing that history of like after a year realized I got to break up with this person. So
Yeah.
what do you think the best way is for termination? Ideally, we have goals, we meet the goals, we say goodbye, congratulations, like a graduation.
Yes, that would be the perfect
How it
scenario.
happens. Yeah.
Yeah, gosh, it's so hard. It's so hard to have these conversations. And as a therapist, we want to like connect with people,
Mhm.
and we're in this field of helpers, and so we want to help, but also
Right.
we recognize it's not always, we're not the best fit for everybody, and that's fine. That doesn't,
Yeah.
that's part of this process.
It's so hard though to remind
It is.
ourselves it's not about us. It's really just about walking with this person on their path, not not really being in the thick of it with them, not experiencing it with them. It's really just witnessing and holding that space. And so if they don't think we're the right person to create that container and keep that container safe for them, then they should walk away.
Hmm.
But it would be respectful if they gave us a heads up and and even some feedback. And I tell people from the get-go, I am open to feedback. It's hard,
Yeah.
but I'm really open to it. So that's, some people give me feedback right from the get-go. Like I talk too loud and too fast and therefore I interrupt. And I've explained to people as my anxiety increases, if I'm working with somebody that's highly anxious, I have a tendency to speak louder and quicker and might interrupt. But 2, I'm also just trying to get clarity. Like,
Yeah.
and so I just need to say, let me repeat this and see if I'm getting it right. So if I don't say that, it then just seems that I'm like trying to figure you out on my own, but I'm really not. I'm really just trying to hear you correctly so that I can then repeat back to you what you're trying to convey to me. I don't want to misunderstand, but I can appreciate that sometimes that comes off as disruptive because they just want to like get it out
Hmm.
and don't want me to stop their flow. So
Yeah.
I've gotten that feedback, and that's super easy to stop because I just remind myself, listen, just listen. You're just here to listen.
Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah.
And it's good. But feedback like this is not a good fit for no particular reason, it's just hurtful, honestly. Like it just hurts my feelings and I can't help it.
It does. And that's where I think as therapists, it's finding this line of like, okay, it might just be that we're not a good fit, or maybe we did do something that really rubbed the person the wrong way.
Oh,
And so we just need to take that and reflect on it and be accountable and hopefully apologize if
yeah.
we are given that space
Yeah.
and try to do better. If we don't have that feedback, we don't know. So, like
Right.
this example of going a year and it's not a good fit, it just makes me wonder. Like, I'm sure we've both had clients like that. And it's like, gosh, if we had known, maybe we could
Yeah.
have done something different.
Well, and
But I also,
especially at a place like Catholic Charities. So, like in community mental health, when you're just matched with the next available therapist, that's to be expected. And they might have a not so good fit and still give feedback. And Catholic Charities, in their defense, like really encourages therapists to get and solicit feedback. Like, how is the session for you? How's it working? How are you feeling? How are you feeling about our work together? Are we on the right path? Like, they're very conscientious about that. But I can see people in poverty and living on the margins who like don't get a lot of respect in their day-to-day life, not feeling like they can speak up to
yeah,
say, this woman's just too young for me. Like, she's not vibing with my lifestyle at all. Like, I bet there's a lot of that. Unfortunately for them, there's a lot of turnover. So the frustration actually is like can be the turnover of therapists. But with that brings diversity and I mean, I think there's so many gifts that come with different therapists. So I definitely think people should change it up. But yeah, what was happening with the therapist that was working with a person for a year and not terminating too? Are they just,
maybe they thought everything was okay.
yeah, they thought it was okay or they weren't soliciting feedback? Yeah, right. If the person was smiling and passive in acceptance of their approach, there have no way of knowing.
Yeah.
So that is definitely a conversation that I would have at intake to make sure that the person followed up with the therapist to say, like, have you had a conversation about why they were not a good fit for you? Because it's really important for that person's practice that they receive that information. But
Yeah.
that's a hard conversation to have. But they can
Hmm.
write a letter, they can write an email, they can send a text. Like, there's just nothing worse than being ghosted and having to fill in the blanks.
Yeah.
So,
It's so tricky. We
yeah,
are, I think, especially our generation, I don't know, we were kind of taught not to like talk back to authority figures. And in a
right.
way,
Yeah,
therapists, I think, are viewed as like an authority figure.
I
And
appreciate that you're
people, I
pointing
think,
that out.
come in and they have this like, oh, a need to please us,
Yeah,
or I don't know, say like it's getting better or things are going good. And
right.
hopefully we can create a space where if something's not good, then clients feel comfortable telling us.
Yeah. So yeah, it's ideal for a person to discharge themselves because they've met their goals and then know that they can come back anytime. But the reality is people, one of the goals for therapy is self-determination, right? And autonomy. And so if they decide after a few months that they're done, then good for them. Or if they decide, oh, your approach isn't working for me, like the modality you're using is not working for me, I really need somebody that is specialized in EMDR or DBT, then good for them. And
Hmm.
not that we can't work with them together though, because then I just encourage people, we'll get a release of information signed, let's just share information, because my specialization is not in eating disorders, my specialization is not in postpartum, and therefore we can still keep your support team intact but grow it, because I'm always encouraging people to do that with acupuncture, chiropractic, massage, all kinds of other holistic perspectives that help the therapeutic process. Why wouldn't I want to work with another therapist for the same goal of helping this person achieve their desires?
Hmm. Yeah. And I do think, going back to like being ghosted, or like in an ideal world, it's because goals have been met and people are feeling better. I do think sometimes clients are feeling better.
Yeah.
And so they either not necessarily ghost, but like, I don't know, I've worked at a practice where we had administrative staff. So the clients will call the office and say,
Right.
I'm feeling better and I don't need to come anymore. And that's great. But
Yeah.
like, as like a highly sensitive person who
Yeah.
is also very anxious, I'm like, but are they? Like, maybe they just didn't like me.
And we
But
need
I
closure.
do
I
think,
think that's what you're
yeah,
speaking to. We actually need that because we get attached to people. We can't help it working with
yeah,
people. Yeah, you're right. And we've had some awesome, like, front office reception staff that we've worked with, and they're just beautiful people. And so, of course, our clients would call them and just be connected to them. Like, they're connected with them because they check them in every time they come for an appointment
yeah.
in person.
Or it's also just easier to say, it's easier to
Oh,
not say goodbye. I
yeah.
mean,
I'm
talk about
out.
tough
You're not going
conversations.
to be seeing me anymore, especially if they handled scheduling. They're like, I'm just not going to schedule anymore after this.
Hmm.
Yeah, right. That can be helpful. But yeah, termination, it comes up in every interaction like that we have with our doctors, whether we like change hair salons. I know people are so mixed if they like change their stylist, you feel like you're
Oh
cheating on the
no,
stylist, right?
no.
So it's there are other opportunities. Again, if you practice with your therapist and have the hard conversation about what you did or did not like, you can move on with a clear conscience. And so can your therapist. Your therapist can move on, because I don't
Hmm.
think people often take the time to really mourn the loss of clients that they really enjoyed working with and did come to closure with. But I mean, I've burst into tears after hanging up with a client who I had the last meeting with. I've also had sighs of relief, like finally, like we've worked through it, and it's good. But both ways, I can't deny the impact that this person has had on my life. It's
Yeah,
really powerful to be in this position. It's such a privilege. And for them to have shared any personal information, let alone the scariest, biggest secret
yeah,
they hold, you
yeah. It's
know,
such an honor to like be in that person's space and they can
yeah.
be vulnerable. Yeah,
And I guess that brings up the reality that as therapists, we're not allowed to be friends with them, and I think the counseling guidelines are like 7 years. Like after 7 years, you can
yeah,
socialize or something like that. But social work is very clear. You are never to be friends,
never.
never to be in a
Hmm.
social relationship. And that crosses over into like social media. It's like people can follow you, but you can't be interacting because that breaks HIPAA. That's a total HIPAA violation. So,
Hmm.
like they can give reviews, but they can know that they're outing themselves in terms of their confidentiality. So it's dicey. So it's just best not to engage on social
Hmm.
media. And so I try and tell people, I hope you're not offended, but I'm going to block you. And I've been blocked, like by my adoption social worker. It was terrible, but I told her, I'm not going to do it. You're going to have to initiate. And that's just that. So, but it's
Yeah.
terrible because I would love to be in touch and I would love just those casual touch points as well. Like I want to know how
Mhm.
people are doing. I want to know how their family is doing that I heard so much about over the time that
Yeah.
we worked together. So yeah, it's interesting. It's hard to do that. But 7 years definitely feels like some good distance and to maintain objectivity. But the reality is we had privileged knowledge that needs to be locked away in that safe box for safekeeping, I guess, is
Hmm.
how the board of social workers views it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anything else on termination, transference and counter-transference? Are there any examples of it going well or going poorly?
Well, I think I don't know if I have an example of it going well, but just the idea of like having these conversations, my experience has been, even though it's hard, and maybe it is a this is not the right fit conversation.
Yes.
Usually I think there's clarity and people feel better after those conversations. So I think it's one of those things of like it gets easier the more you do it, and
Yeah.
it feels good getting it out instead of holding
Right.
those thoughts to like spiral in.
Yeah, part of the experiences that I've had one person and couple say, "Oh, you would be so fun to probably go drinking with," and I've had to be like, "No, like that's not how we're relating here." Like, I think their relationship was so chaotic and the drama they would bring to the sessions, like I had to stop them from fighting one time. I was like, "I'm literally getting ready to hang up because I can't do this with you. I'm not going to sit here and witness an argument. It's not productive." And but they were like, "I love you," and just all these like expressions which were super flattering, I have to say, but made me so uncomfortable because it was not professional. And so I had to constantly kind of like put limits down. And then another one, really, it was just for the purpose of wanting even more empathy than I was already giving. Like, come to my house. I wish you could see the chaos that these kids are causing, you know, like, and I get that. And I'm like, I got my own chaos. Like, I get it, you know? And so that was part of just growing our relationship, I think. But I think there is, it comes into play with humor. When people joke around, they start to feel more comfortable and they let their guard down, and then they think we're friends. And I have to remind myself and them, really, that's for me, the acknowledgement is kind of putting myself back in the box as well, maintaining some clinical objectivity, and then just reestablishing for them the boundaries and kind of the rules of engagement, because we talk about that in their relationships. Rules of engagement is super important, especially when it comes to arguing, but we don't necessarily talk about that. You and I have a code of conduct that people sign, but who's reading it, you know? So, and that's mostly like, if you miss a couple, we're going to probably have to limit your sessions. And if you miss a session, we're probably going to charge you a cancellation or no show fee. But that's what people get out of those forums, not how do I relate to you and you to me.
Yeah.
So yeah, fascinating stuff. Well, that's all I can think of for now
Me too.
on those topics. We'll be back soon with the next hot topic.
Yeah. Do we have something to wrap up? I did,
Ooh.
maybe since I think we didn't grab our cards. I did find something that it was like a meme that maybe we can end with this tip.
Oh, awesome.
So it was a tip for when you have an urge, and like, I don't know, an urge to eat something, grab something that maybe a substance that you probably shouldn't, or something like that. So the idea is just give yourself 90 seconds before you act. Like, our brains really only need that 90-second interval to like calm down a bit. Yeah. And so I think that can be used for this, having tough conversations. If you don't know what to say, or you feel yourself going into that like fight, flight, freeze response, just time out it, give yourself 90 seconds, say you need to think about it, and come back and revisit.
That's awesome. Yeah, if you can be present enough to say think about it, or give yourself a minute to think about it, you can get present if you're not already. Because fight, flight, or freeze take over. You start fawning. It's like, wait a second. Yeah, 90 seconds, just a minute and a half. That's great. I also have a Love Life pop open card with the inspiration from Constantine Cavafy. I don't know if I'm saying that right. It says, do not hurry the journey at all. Boom. She said it for us. Yeah, we can't rush this process, that's for sure. Thanks, Sarah. It was great talking to you.
Yeah, see you next time.
Okay, bye.